Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the BUE Research Center for Irish Studies. This is the first of our short talk series. Our very first talk is, our guest speaker is Nermine Fawzy. Hello, Nermine, good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and for giving us your generous time. All right, Nermine, are you with us? Because you seem to have disappeared.
Yes, I'm trying to fix the audio, so I think we're good.
Okay, all right. Okay. Nermine Fawzy is an accomplished leader and an HR expert with over 20 years of experience across different industries. Nermine has managed large results-focused projects globally. She's a co-founder and senior partner at FosterEdge, a hands-on management firm, and a founding board member, COO of Tetcher, HR tech firm, in addition to founding partner of Venture Right. Prior to this, she held senior regional and global HR roles at IT Works, Cargill, and Kantar, among other companies. Nermine is a member on the advisory boards at Endeavor for the past 9 years, and she's a member of the core HR committee of the American Chamber of Commerce in Egypt, and she's a board member at the Human Power Association. Nermine is a certified professional coactive coach from CTI and certified organizational designer. Now, Nermine has an international perspective. She's also lived on 4 continents. So thank you very much, Nermine, for being with us this afternoon. We'd like to hear your perspective on today's short talk, which is titled Addressing the Graduate Skills Gap and Changing Graduate Requirements, Developing Real-World Understanding of the Professional Workplace, the Job Market Post-Pandemic. I'm sure the job market has changed post-COVID-19 in terms of the requirements and the skills and the expectations, and even the work setup to what we often known as normal. So please, the floor is yours, and let's start when you're ready.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction. So the probably one thing that Dr. Rania left out is me and her know each other from living on one of those 4 continents many, many moons ago.
Yes, in Australia. We lived in Australia. It was in Canberra.
Correct. All right, so I will share my screen. So today I'm going to talk about, I think, a couple of perspectives related to the topic. And probably what I'd like to start out with is just some things that I think are very important about the different generations in the workforce. So here's kind of an outline of the different generations in the workforce. So baby boomers, who are probably at the end of their kind of professional careers, and most of them have moved out and continue to move out. Then the Generation Xers, so I'm a hardcore Generation Xer, and followed by Generation Y, or the Millennials, which we hear a whole lot about. But the generation we hear less about, but we're starting to hear about, is Generation Z. And they're really entering the workforce and have been in the last couple of years. So we'll see more and more and hear more and more of Generation Z, or sometimes called iGen. And then, we're seeing more and more in the workforce. So we're going to be talking about some of these differences and how they impact work. But first, maybe talk generally about the workforce. So I've used a couple of stats from different sources, but I think starting off with this, I think, is really important, puts things into perspectives. So by 2025, which is coming up very soon, in a couple of years, over half the workforce will be made up of Generation Y and Generation Z. Generation Xers, like me, will probably hold more leadership and management positions just by experience. What I think is really interesting and a real shift is Generation Y and Zers will opt to work in smaller setups, SMEs, so small, medium enterprises, including startups, which we hear a whole lot about, and scale-ups. So rather than large corporations. So baby boomers and Generation Xers like me have a tendency and had a tendency to work for bigger corporations. Generation Y and Z will work more for SMEs and startups and scale-ups. Generation Y and Z will have jobs that don't currently exist, which is, exciting and slightly scary, I think. So these are more facts. This is, so the World Economic Forum does a really great job on looking at the future of work, and they continuously do a study called the Future of Jobs Survey. Some of the stats from the World Economic Forum, which are quite astounding actually, is around half of workers will require reskilling of 6 months or less. So it'll take 6 months for people to take on and learn different skills. Half of us will need to reskill in the next 5 years. So a lot of that coming from the impact definitely of the pandemic, which continues to impact everyone globally, but also as a result of a lot of automation transforming current jobs. The vast majority of business leaders, so 94%, that's a huge number, expect employees to really learn skills on the job, versus from a couple of years ago where that was 65%. So just the expectations from employers on how people learn is changing significantly and has very, very fast in the last couple of years. So this is also from the World Economic Forum. These are the top 10 skills identified for 2025. And as you can probably see, a lot of them are have to do with technology, but also some of them have to do with things like resilience and stress tolerance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Some of those have to do with active learning, which we'll also talk about, critical thinking and problem solving. Leadership and social influence has climbed, I think, the list in the last couple of years. So all of these are skills identified that will be super, super important in the next 4 to 5 years. So technology is a big part of that, and technology is something I hold very close to my heart. I'm very fond of it, and I'm involved in a lot of endeavors that have to do with technology. But I think some of these numbers also from the World Economic Forum are quite interesting. So 50% of the employees needing reskilling really is a direct result of what's happening with technology. The forum estimates that in the next couple of years, 85 million jobs will be changed just because of machines entering our lives and technology entering our lives. The good news, and that's really scary because, there's this whole notion of robots taking over the world and taking over our jobs. The good news is there are a lot more jobs, 97 million, actually will emerge because of those technological changes. So a lot of jobs will change and a lot of jobs will disappear, but many more will come into light. So what we were talking about earlier about the 6 months needed to reskill, this is just kind of a sort of benchmark on what kind of skills will take how long for people to acquire and learn. So there are skills that can be developed 1 to 2 months, 2 to 3 months, and 4 to 5 months. And a lot of this reskilling is really online based. And online based can mean a lot of things. It can mean e-learning, it can be blended learning, it can be virtual learning, which are all a little bit different. But we see more and more of that. And I think what's happened with the pandemic, it's really accelerated that, and it's almost become an expectation. So this is kind of the jobs we were talking about that are exiting and jobs kind of coming into play. So you'll see a lot of the jobs coming into play, a lot of them are very, very tech focused, or as a result of technology. So things like digital marketing. So marketing isn't really a traditionally kind of tech job, but because of what's happening in the landscape, whether all the digital tools, social media and so forth, that's changed significantly. But a lot of the jobs that we'll see are really tech-focused jobs. And a lot of the jobs exiting are what I call very transactional jobs. So things that are easily done by machines and easily automated. So things like data entry. Data entry is really, I think a lot of those jobs have already exited. Things like assembly lines in factories, things like administrative jobs, a lot of financial jobs like accounting. So a lot of the transactional pieces of our lives and of our work are the ones being exited. Now, some of the jobs that really aren't likely to be impacted that much are jobs like caregivers, yeah? So people who work with patients, whether they're medical staff or not, you know, home care, things like that. Medical staff, so nurses, doctors, therapists, you know, that kind of thing. Teachers, which is good news, I think, to a lot of people at BUE, will also not really be impacted. We'll continue to need people who can teach people how to do things. How that's done and their skills probably will likely to differ a bit, but at the core, that's one of the things probably not impacted that much. Artists are probably the least impacted because thank God machines aren't very good at the artistic parts of our lives, yeah? Therapists and other health-related specialists, so maybe people not who don't have medical degrees, but we see a lot of holistic health coaches and things of that sort. There's a lot of jobs out there, and I think especially because of technology, people who help people deal with stress management and wellness. So not necessarily have medical degrees, but they are specialized in helping people deal with different issues. Those are likely to increase, and I think we've seen that in the last 6 months to a great extent. Sports professionals, yeah. So machines also don't do that yet, and hopefully won't for a while. So, you know, people who play professional sports, tennis players, football players, and the like. So these are jobs probably not likely to be impacted one way or the other. So the other, I think, context that's important is that because of all the changes in the world and especially in medicine and the environment, life expectancy is becoming longer, which means that people will live longer, which means people will need to work longer. One of the things you know, people always kind of dream about you know, retiring and what to do after retirement, but because governments can't support, you know, pensions for you know, 30 and 40 and 50 years, people will need to live longer. If we look at retirement ages, legal retirement ages, in the last 10 years, they've increased, and we see that especially in more developed world, but also we're seeing that in developing countries, and in Egypt in the last year or so, we've seen retirement ages, you know, beginning to increase. So very soon the retirement age in Egypt even will move from 60 to 65. In a lot of the developing world where the retirement age was traditionally 65, it's moved to 70, and in some countries it's moving beyond that, yeah? So this is just kind of, you know, estimates on, you know, if people are how old today, how long they'll live, and what that retirement age will change to. And these are obviously forecasts, but they seem very in line with how long people are living. So we're going to actually be working longer than you know, baby boomers and even Generation Xers like me. So what does that mean for work? Basically, you know, all of us start off with some kind of formal education. We spend many, many years working and then retiring. What has already happened, says the future, but I think it's already in effect, is that because of the changing nature of work, And because so many jobs don't exist today that will exist in the future, the cycle of work and learning and changing is a lot longer. So more people will learn more skills, have different careers throughout their lifetime before retirement. That's a huge shift in previous decades. So, I like sharing kind of some of the differences between generations, because I think they really impact how we work and working in the future. Starting off with kind of the impact of technology. So, my generation of Xers, when we came into the workforce, technology wasn't really a big thing. We had to really learn technology, and there was a lot of resistance just because it was very difficult. The notion of technology was just so far-fetched. And with Generation Y, they've become a lot more comfortable because they use technology at a younger age. The difference with Generation Zers is they're what we call digital natives. So basically, as they've opened kind of their eyes onto the world, they found technology. We see a lot of 2-year-olds, using tablets and iPads and so forth. So definitely my generation, that just didn't exist. So the expectation with technology is that not only will technology be part of the workplace, sophisticated technology will be an essential part of the workplace. Everyone's expectations will be to have some level of not just technology, but sophisticated technology to help us with our work. So that's a key shift that we've seen. And looking at all the anticipated future jobs and skills, that's quite obvious, I guess. Okay, so education and learning, which I think is interesting. So, formal education was very, very much valued by Generation Xers. With Generation Y and Z, that becomes less of a focus. So, some level of formal education, and in some fields that'll remain, like the medical field, you need some kind of certification to practice medicine. But there's a shift from long-term, very heavy programs into shorter-term, certificates, diplomas, and then with Generation Z, they're really picking up this notion on what we call just-in-time learning. So in my generation and the generations and a bit of Generation Y, their focus was just-in-case learning. So you go into the workforce, you get all this training and all this information, all this learning around many, many different things, because we may need to use them. So it's just in case learning. So if we have an opportunity to use that skill, we've acquired it. With Generation Z, there's a lot less of that. It'll be, we learn what we need to learn now, and it's very, very bite-sized learning. So if I'm doing something on a spreadsheet and I'm not quite sure how to do it, you go in, you take a 10-minute tutorial, you come back to work, and then you start using that learning, which is very, very different. So shorter, bite-sized, we see all these online courses where you can learn how to do things in a day, in 6 hours, in 20 minutes, less so than these 3-day, 5-day, 6-week, 10-week programs. So that'll become more and more focused, and the learning also becomes more and more focused. So there's definitely a shift in learning and education. How we work will also change. Generation Xers got work delegated. We didn't argue too much. We just kind of took it on, and we felt that we had to kind of earn our way up. We wanted to be involved in big picture, but if we're not, we were okay with that. There's an expectation from Generation Y that they'll be a lot more involved in the big picture. They're a lot more focused on not just being assigned work, but also coaching and mentoring. With some customization. So, sending a whole sales team to a sales training was a very Generation X kind of work style. With Generation Y, it's more focused on, do you really need that kind of training or that kind of learning? With Generation Z, it'll be very, very customized, so and personalized. So what I need as an individual will take on a whole new meaning versus, you know, a blanket approach to learning. There will also almost be a demand to be involved in the big picture. So no longer kind of getting information secondhand from managers and leaders, but really being involved in the decision-making process. I think the other thing is, you know, in the last, I think, 5-6 years, there's been such a focus on collaboration. Generation Zers are a lot more competitive, so we'll start seeing that in the workplace, and we really need to figure out how to manage that and leverage that to make work environment still successful and not get, you know, ultra competitive where it's no longer healthy. The other parts of work is, you know, Generation X, you know, work was such an important part of life. You know, we did almost everything around it. You know, we appreciated feedback, but it was very, very formal. It happened, you know, maybe once, maybe twice a year, but not much more than that. With Generation Y, their expectation is a lot more frequent rounds of feedback. So, you know, monthly, quarterly, that sort of thing. And work is part of life. And you know, there's a big notion of this work-life balance. I'm not a huge fan of the term, but, you know, let me use that term because that's what is used. So work remains an important part of life, but it's not, you know, the central part of life. With Generation Z, you know, they expect life integration. So no longer work-life balance, you know, so we're going to work and then we're going to go live the rest of our lives. It's very, very integrated. And what I mean by that, people want to work when they want to work. So, you know, if they work in the middle of the night, that's when they want to work. If they work early in the morning, this whole notion of, you know, a very, very separate work and life experience, that's quickly disappearing. And I think we're all feeling that, you know, with emails and, you know, at 9 p.m., that's become very, very normal part of life. You know, having, you know, Zoom calls and that sort of thing at all hours of the day. So it's really, really, I think, different, because work for Generation Zers is no longer the most important part of life. It's just a part of life, just like everything else. It's taken on a lot less significance and seen more as just a smaller part of life versus a bigger part of life like Generation X and even to some extent Generation Y. The other thing that I think is super interesting is career paths. So, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about career paths, and in corporates, that's still a big thing, but those generally, I think, are disappearing. We have, because there are so many jobs that don't exist today, and because of, you know, relearning and jobs disappearing and new jobs coming up, the notion that you'll have one career or two careers throughout your lifetime is, I don't want to say it has disappeared, but pretty much it's going out the window. You know, this whole notion of retention and long-term retention in corporations, that's also disappearing. You know, retention for HR folks, and, you know, there are a lot of measures around that and how we retain people. The reality is retention periods and how long people stay in jobs and companies will significantly be shortened, just because people want to explore new things. They want to try new things. They want different experiences. And so, you know, leaving your current employer and going to another one, we'll see a lot more of that. I think corporations are already feeling the pain around that. But I think we need to encompass that and work with that, because the reality is it's going to happen. So instead of continuing to resist and try to fix something that's probably very difficult to change, I think we need to consider new ways of what to do with people as they remain within organizations, how to really leverage their experience and their input. Also, we'll see a lot of career changes. So people who work in sales may end up working in technology. People who work in finance may take up careers in sales. People who work in HR will move into things like therapy. So there's a lot of movement between different careers, and we'll see more and more of that. Traditionally people only worked in one job. We'll see a lot more people working two parallel jobs, so not two full-time jobs, but probably 50% of their time in one job and then 50% of their time in a completely different job. Keeping people engaged and excited would probably mean that we need to involve people in, one-off projects and assignments to, keep it interesting and expose them to new things and help them gain new learnings, but also for companies to really leverage that and really take advantage of that. So what does all this mean? So technology, and I think no secret, it'll have the biggest impact on our lives. I think we've already seen that. The other thing that I think we're slowly coming to realize is that employee populations will become more diverse. So the traditional kind of definition of diversity around race and gender and so forth, that's a part of it. But also we'll see a lot more employee makeups where you have people in different time zones in different countries all working in the same team, just because employability is now global. So you can have a team made up of someone in the UK, someone in India, someone in China, someone in Canada, and they need to work around things like time zones and cultural understanding and communication and many things. So it'll become a lot more complicated, even with technology. Managerial skills, probably one of the toughest things today. If we look at kind of business leaders, they identify leadership and managerial skills as very tough and very sought out. That'll become more and more difficult just because of working arrangements. A lot of us learn how to become good managers and good leaders because we watch our own managers and leaders, how they deal with things, how they work with others. So we see them, how they interact. Because so many of our jobs and so much of what we do is moving into a virtual / online world, people see less of that. So that learning will be stress. It'll be a lot more difficult to acquire that kind of skill. So both managerial and leadership capabilities. And people will change jobs frequently. We need to get on board with that and see how to manage that and how to live with that and how to be prepared for that. I think one of the things that still surprises me, how many people are not ready for people, leaving the organization, especially when you have someone very important. They have a very important skill set. They have certain, very deep, intimate customer relationships, being ready for that, because it will happen. So we need to do a better job of becoming prepared for that than anything else. So I think one of the things that we've seen with COVID-19, it's really challenged a lot of our assumptions. A lot of organizations traditionally said, we can't do this online, we can't have people working from home, we can't do this, we can't do that. Even corporations where they've introduced, things like flex time working and so forth, they were still really challenged, and we kept hearing it would never work, we can't do this. So I think we've all learned from the experience with this pandemic is actually a lot of that can work. We probably need to think about how to make it work and how to leverage it as best as we can, but definitely it's challenged our assumptions. And it's really pushed our limits. So, thinking about how to ensure that we have the right technology to support those assumptions, I think a lot of people are relooking at that, especially on a technical technology tools and platforms perspective, how we interact with our teams. You know, a lot of managers have really struggled with, how do I engage a team where we don't see each other, I don't see them, you know, even when we have, you know, meetings with cameras and voice, but we're not physically together, we don't see each other. There's no room for really kind of thinking together as a team unless we really make the effort. And that is quite, I think, challenging. Internal talent reality checks. So, you know, a lot of companies do some kind of talent assessment where they identify, you know, key players, top performers, people who are really important to the organization. And I think through this pandemic, I think some of those assumptions and some of those convictions have changed. So maybe people that we thought were top talent, actually when they've been really put to the test, they aren't top talent. Yeah, they've struggled with things like ambiguity and managing the unknown, and you know, really tough change management protocols and so forth. So I think a lot of that has really been tested. Well-being, and I'm sure all of you have seen, there are a lot of programs, a lot of discussion on various parts of well-being. A term probably unheard of 5 years ago. You know, how to manage this, how to manage the stress of working from the same place that we live, with kids at home, you know, studying online, with, you know, various things around us, with technology that maybe wasn't really set up to support how we work today. So, you know, the stress around that, and managing our time and managing our attention span, and you know, work really becoming very involved in our lives, and our lives really becoming involved in work. You know, I was on a call with someone a couple of weeks ago, and her baby was crying, so she was kind of carrying her baby as we had the call, because there's no other option. So, you know, really managing that stress and helping people with that, I think has really become important, and I think it'll become more important with us continuing to live throughout this pandemic and beyond. And I think the other thing that really COVID-19 has brought to the forefront is it really gives us a glimpse of the future. So, you know, a lot of things that, you know, the assumptions that we can't do it or won't be able to do it, I think that's changed. You know, you know, leveraging new skills, and you know, changing how people work and how we come together and how we produce results and how to make sure that we're delivering on those results is really going to be something that we all need to look at and figure out how to manage moving forward. I think from, you know, people today who are still kind of in universities, colleges, even schools, you know, people always ask me, so what should we study? What should we be looking at? I think the key still is to really study what you really enjoy. I think that's what really sets people up for success, but also, you know, really focus on what we call transferable skills. So skills that we can use in various jobs. And you know, a lot of people refer to those as soft skills. I call them essential skills. I don't think they're soft at all. I think they're essential skills. So things like, you know, problem solving, things like emotional intelligence is very key. Things like learning agility. So being able to learn a skill and use it. I think the era of, you know, very formal training is slowly dying, because what usually happens with formal training is people go, they learn a great skill, they use it for a couple of days within that workshop or training or otherwise, and then they go back to their job and how, you know, how they used to do their job without really integrating that learning. So I think, you know, making sure that everything we learn, we purposefully think about how to adopt that learning in how we continue working after acquiring that learning. We'll see a lot more of that. And then the one thing, unfortunately, it's a reality. People need to become really comfortable with technology. So that does mean all of us will become, super duper kind of data scientists and, people who work with cybersecurity and very sophisticated technology. But there is a certain minimal level that all of us need to get comfortable learning and get comfortable using and get comfortable continuing to evolve those skills, because they're a reality. There's no way out. I think people who've resisted that are the ones that end up losing out. I think the other thing that we see a great amount of, specialists are fantastic subject matter experts, but they're so kind of focused on one area. We don't know if that area will exist, in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So making sure that we have, an area of specialization is great, but also making sure that we become more generalist. So we have skill sets in 1 or 2 areas that are quite in depth, but we have some level of expertise in 2 or 3 other areas, just to give us options and to make sure that we're set up for success for the future. So, if this area of specialty or expertise doesn't exist in a couple of years, at least we have a couple of things we can kind of, transition to and acquire more expertise in, to be able to be set up for success in new careers, related careers, or very, very different careers. And that is kind of, I tried to keep it as kind of, concise as possible. So, I can ramble probably for the next, 3 hours on this, but I think this gives kind of a summary of, I think, where we are and where we're going, and the importance of, change and the future of jobs, but also what we've gone through as a result of this pandemic, and probably more to come because of this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Nermine, Fawzy, for this overview, and also for the statistics as they've used. I think in summary, you've highlighted not only that the need for the, you've sort of portrayed, generation X, Y, X, Y, and Z, and how they're, what they're traditionally are like, or you gave definitions of the different generations. But you've also moved on to say that in the next 5 years, we need to reskill, and because this is an expectation by 94% of employers. And also as a result of automation. And you've also shared with us the top 10 skills for 2025, which would prepare academics like myself, and also schools and undergraduate students and graduating students, to get a fair idea of what is required by the job market. And this is not just something local, this is global. That was a global perspective of the top skills required for 2025. You've also shared with us some scary facts that by 2025, 85 million jobs will be displaced. But the good news was that 97 million jobs will emerge as a result of the automation, and because of the jobs that don't currently exist, they will be new types of jobs. Whether we will be able to, as Generation X, if I will be able to catch on to those new emerging jobs, I don't know, but I'll have to work very hard to make sure I catch something. You've also highlighted that the retirement ages are moving, towards 65 and 70 and even 81 for Generation Z. You've highlighted also the impact of technology education and the work on the different generations, X, Y, and Z, and how they're going to be impacted. Most importantly, you've also, I think something that is key is the learning agility, which my generation, at least me, I'm experiencing at the moment, is that if I take on a new task, I'm required to learn on the job. No staff development workshop. I mean, there are, but in terms of, here's a task, figure it out, and work out what is required to accomplish this task, which is rather uncomfortable. But yes, it has also exposed our vulnerabilities, where we stand in terms of skills and what we can accomplish. So it does push us to seek, to seek the best versions of ourselves. You've also highlighted that what we thought was normal is no longer normal, and what was always we were always told is not doable is now doable. Something like flex time working, and also the reality check of our internal talent within our organizations, who are the really talented people, as opposed to who we actually thought were talented. And I do agree with you, COVID-19 has not only just pushed us to our limits, has exposed our vulnerabilities, but has also given us a glimpse of the future, of what our future is going to be like. Thank you very much for this insightful short talk, organized and hosted by the BUE Research Center for Irish Studies. We'd like to open the floor for questions from our audiences. We had actually earlier, we had 12 audiences, participants today, which I think is very nice since this is our very first talk. So if there's any questions, please go ahead and direct them directly to Nermine Fawzy. Well, I have a question, Nermine, if you can take that on. As an academic, and you are an HR expert with a global perspective, what advice would you give a university in terms of, when we're designing curriculums, we have new expectations such as employability skills that is embedded in every course specification or module specification. So, which helps us see that by the end of the 4 years, these are the skills we'd like to see in our graduate. So as an HR expert with a global perspective, when you're hiring, and I know you shared the top 10 skills for 2025, but what would be the skills you would automatically say, yes, I'm taking that graduate from this particular university as opposed to this one, from your perspective?
So I think that's a great question. So I think, from just there's this transition when people finish kind of formal education into the workplace. And I think the organizations and HR people really, really struggle because a lot of what is currently in a lot of curriculums in general, and this is globally, this is everywhere from, from the US to Europe to, China, everywhere. There's this disconnect between what curriculums teach and what we really need on the ground. And that makes work for us and finding talent so much more difficult. A lot of the curriculums are really designed around what's happened in the past, and that was that was the reality at one point in time. But I don't think the evolution of curriculums is moving fast enough. So what we're teaching today probably was very relevant maybe 15, 20 years ago. It is no longer relevant. And sometimes I see some of these curriculums and I'm like, okay, so at a very, very theoretical level, this makes sense, but in reality, this is not what happens. And I think we really, really struggle. Many years ago, people who have MBAs and master's degree right after finishing their undergrad studies, that had a lot of weight. But because the practical experience is so different from what is taught in academia, they're no longer really at an advantage compared to people who have some level of experience. What would really make a difference when we're hiring fresh grads is people who've actually experienced internships and have really experienced a taste of reality. And I really mean real internships. We see, unfortunately, a lot of organizations who check the box for different reasons on internships where people don't really learn a whole lot, which is a shame. But making sure that people have that kind of experience, that they've seen what the workplace is like, they understand the importance of being open to learning, being open to different perspectives, having an opinion, but also listening to other people's opinions. One of the things that we were talking about earlier with learning agility, and if we look at kind of definition of learning agility, is being able to take a learning and your first experience with it, you're able to use it and think on your feet and develop that very quickly. So people who can do that will definitely have more of an advantage than people who find that more difficult. Interpersonal skills, being able to work as a team. Communication is so very important. We see a lot of people who aren't able to communicate clearly their perspective or point of view. And sometimes the perspective is fantastic. They're just not good at, because they want to dominate the conversation, or they don't voice it in the way it should. So really understanding how to make your voice heard, your opinion heard, but also being very open to learning and dealing with other people, dealing with very different people. I think one of the things that happens within universities, we sort of live in a bubble. We deal with people who are very, very similar to each other, and not realizing there's a whole nother world out there. So people who work in, who go to private universities or Ivy League universities or whatever, and then they go work at a manufacturing facility where there's blue collar workers, there's external parties, whether some of those are government, some of those are whatever the case may be. Being able to take that on and deal with different people, that's super, super important. People who have a richer background. We see some people who are really, really good at one thing, but when you try to have a conversation with them on something different, it's very, very far from them. So that broadness, that experience, that knowledge, I always send people a whole lot of readings on different stuff. When I've done kind of graduate programs at different companies that I worked in, whatever their field of kind of expertise is, or their field of education, we always try to introduce different things. So if we're hiring people who study computer science, we gave them a lot of business cases. We gave them things around human psychology, behavioral economics, very, very different things, because that's so very, very important to how they do their work and how to set them up for success. So
thank you
very long.
Thank you very much for this very deep and insightful answer. We have a question from Dr. Shayma Hassanin. She had her hand raised up. She's put her hand down now. But if you're still there.
Thank you, I'm here.
Hello, Dr. Shayma.
Yes, thank you very much for this informative and valuable lecture. We need it so much. I'm a lecturer of English language and American literature in Horace University, Egypt, New Damietta. I constantly deal with students and staff on the same level. During my lectures, I ask the students that you don't have to sit here and just listen. You can participate, because in the job market, you must participate in everything. Otherwise, you are not going to be a special for the job, because we have many engineers, many doctors, but how come you can be a perfect one or a special in your career? Through using soft skills. We depend mainly on soft skills. I teach them presentation and the communication skills, and I ask my students to participate. There's nothing that we can say that there's one-way education. We have two-way education, which means that the students must be a participant in the educational process, so he can gain the main elements of becoming a perfect in the job market. So during participation in the lectures, I ask my students to come here, please become an instructor. Show me your skills, because in the job market, you are going to live in like a war or something. I just exaggerate things so they can understand the importance of having many skills. So I did something which was something new to them. I urged them to come and participate in the educational process all the time, so they can participate in the job market after that. So I just want to concentrate on the soft skills. Everyone should have soft skills like communication skills, presentation skills, time management as well, character building skills. because you are not in the college, you are building your character. You are not just going to learn something. No, there are knowledge and skills. They go side by side. So this is very important. I like the topic so much. It was very important and valuable. Thank you for giving us this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shaima Hassanin.
I'd probably add, I mean, I think two other skills that are very underrated and very much needed, problem solving and critical thinking. I think those are two, especially with the changes and unexpected changes in the world around us. Those are two that are quite important. You know, if I wish I could change the naming of soft skills to essential skills, because, you know, as soon as you say soft, it's almost like it's, you know, secondary or less important, while they're essential skills. Without those, no matter how fantastic a doctor you are, how fantastic an engineer you are, how fantastic anything you are, without those essential skills, you're not very valuable to the organization or society at large.
Nermine, I'm going to make a request, and of course, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here, and you do not have to answer now. But given given the fact that you've highlighted the importance of practical experience and real-world understanding of the job market, we'd like to actually help people as much as we can, and also bridge the gap between academia and the job market and industry. Would it be possible through the BUE Research Center for Irish Studies that FosterEdge offers us, you know, our undergraduate students or even our graduate students internship opportunities? You do not have to answer now, but please think about it.
Right. So the short answer and the easy answer is absolutely yes. And yeah, so I'd love to do that, and we work with various clients where we can definitely use interns. I think the expectation when working with us is it'll be a very, very challenging internship. It won't be an easy internship, which is I think what makes it important. It really builds skills and builds stamina and builds a different kind of skill set, I think. So definitely yes, I'd love to.
Okay, great. Well, I'll send you an email, and then we can talk about how we can go about this. And it does not have to be a paid internship. It's just the fact that they actually get that training and something to acknowledge that they've you know, seen, you know, they have an understanding of the real world workplace. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to all the participants who made the time to join us this afternoon. You're welcome to join our future seminars and short talks. If anyone is interested in giving a short talk on an important topic, please feel free to email us at either rania.khalil@bue.edu.eg or rcis@bue.edu.eg, and please visit our website for all the announcements, seminars, and projects. Nermine Fawzy, I cannot thank you enough. My old-time friend, and I'm also very proud of you for what you have been able to achieve, and thank you so much, and best of luck to FosterEdge and your partners, and I'll be emailing you regarding the internships.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it was it made a difference. It gave you some glimpse into what's happening.
Thank you very much. Have a pleasant afternoon. And thank you very much from the BUE Research Center for Irish Studies to everyone. Bye-bye.